Next guests are out with one of the most detailed accounts yet of the Trump presidency. Chief White House correspondent for the New York Times, Peter Baker, and staff writer for The New Yorker, Susan Glasser, join us now. They are out with a new book titled The Divider, Trump in the White House, 2017 to 2021. In it, they break down the chaotic moments of the previous administration, from the former president's disturbing meeting with Vladimir Putin to just how close he came to pulling the U.S. out of NATO. Peter and Susan, good morning. Congratulations on the book. There is so much in here. Just when we thought we knew everything, I have a stack of questions. I hope you can stay till noon for us. There's so much. But let me stay on the theme of the election. And Susan, Jared and Ivanka, effectively 2 days after the election day, turning their backs and walking out and saying, Jared leans over to Ivanka and says, we're moving to Florida. And that's an important moment because they abandoned Donald Trump and all the election conspiracies and opened the door to all the nut jobs who came in after them.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing moment, right? You know, so for 4 years, the president's daughter and son-in-law basically used the argument to all those who are criticizing their presence in the White House. It's important that he have family around. We are the ones who can talk with him. You know, we're here for critical moments. And then this most critical moment comes. They're not believers, they tell others, in the election conspiracy. They're not election deniers. What do? They buy a $34 million lot on a private island in Miami. They closed on the deal, by the way, weeks after the election in December, even while Trump was continuing his attack on the election. And, you know, essentially they just abdicated. Jared Kushner told others that he was not going to fight for it if Rudy Giuliani was going to be in charge of this election attack. It's this key moment, I think, and it really sort of shows the hollow arguments of the Jared and Ivanka promoters. What was the purpose of them being there if they're going to walk out in the biggest crisis of the Trump presidency?
And that, Peter, that was my next question to you, which is that, okay, they know the election wasn't stolen, and instead of standing in there as the few people who actually do have Donald Trump's ear, they turn and walk away and move to Florida and open the door to Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell and the My Pillow guy. Was there any attempt by either of them to step in and tell their father or their father-in-law that this had gone too far?
I mean, not really. I mean, obviously, I think he knew because they weren't part of this. And at what point Jared Kushner reportedly tells his father-in-law, look, if you're going to go with Rudy, I'm not going to be any part of it. I support you, but I'm not going to be part of this. And he heads off to the Middle East to work on the remainder of his peace, interests and whatever business interests he wants to pursue after leaving office. And it's really, it's not just them, obviously. A number of people who were called by Bill Stepien Team Normal, basically withdrew once they realized that they were not going to be either influential or didn't try to be influential. They stepped back, and it was that void that Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, Mike Lindell, Mike Flynn, all these martial law, seize the voting machines guys basically filled. And there was, there are fewer and fewer people left to fight against them. When Mike Pence was under pressure by the president to try to stop the electoral college count, or at least to take away the states that Joe Biden had won, Mark Short, his chief of staff, goes to Jared Kushner and asks him to intervene with the president and say, can't you help here? Basically, and Kushner says, look, I'm doing Middle East. I'm out of here. I'm not working on this right now. And that's a key moment.
Yeah, they washed their hands of it. So, Susan, that's the end of the administration. You guys start at the beginning, and you say the most important day in the administration probably was the first one, January 20th, 2017, because it set the stage so much and set the tone so much for everything that followed.
Well, that's right. That was the key reason we wanted to do this book. We watched the events of January 6th, and, there was actually this observation by Michael Beschloss on the afternoon of January 6th. He said, this day has been foreshadowed by every day of this presidency. And I think if you go back to January 20th, 2017, you really begin to see the through lines. And, there's a lot of after the fact rationalizations, people like Bill Barr who say, well, he really went too far after the election. But anybody who, I think, closely observed Trump from the beginning, it's hard to see January 6th as anything other than the inexorable and violent culmination of what he was doing for 4 years.
So, Peter, first of all, congrats to you and Susan on the book. Donald Trump was, shall we say, an unconventional foreign policy president. And there's so much in here about his meetings with Putin in Helsinki, his efforts to walk out of NATO. But I was hoping you could focus on this headline, which took my breath away when I read it over the weekend in an early peek of the book, that he nearly gave away the West Bank. Tell us how that could have happened.
Yeah, no, that's right. Look, one thing about doing this book, by the way, is that we built on the work of all of our incredible colleagues, including your great book, John, and a number of others. And I want to make sure we pay credit to people who have come before us working the same territory. What struck us was even with all of the great reporting that's been done over the years, there was still so much to learn. We decided to do this book after he left office because there was more to learn. And so all of the things that we put in this book are things we've learned since then. One of them was this great anecdote where apparently one day President Trump calls up Steve Mnuchin, who's at the Davos conference meeting at the time with King Abdullah of Jordan. He put him on the phone. He said, "Hey, King, I've got a great deal for you. I'm going to give you the West Bank." And anybody who understands Jordan, where the Palestinian population is sort of a restive force in politics there, understand that was not anything King Abdullah wanted. He didn't want that at all. And he told an American friend, I nearly had a heart attack. He said, I doubled over. I couldn't breathe. And it sort of went to where Donald Trump's view of the world is. He was very, very superficial and transactional, and he's going to simply give the king something the king has no interest in having. It explains a lot about his foreign policy. It was very, very much built on the basis of somebody who didn't spend a single day in office prior to becoming president, and he had a lot to learn. He didn't know the difference between the Baltics and the Balkans. He didn't know that Finland was not part of Russia. There are so few things. We quote one aide as saying he knew nothing about so many things that it was it was very startling to them, even after they spent time in his presence.
So, Susan, off of that anecdote and from beginning to read the book over the past couple of days, I am not a naive person, I don't think, about either politics or the world around us. But I found myself subjected to some sense of depression over the fact that this president, who presented such a daily danger, perhaps an hourly danger, to the country, to the institution of the presidency, seems to have been surrounded by people who knew how dangerous he was and said nothing. How do you explain this?
Yeah, I think that's one of the enduring mysteries of this trial. And I think it is a trial that the country has gone through with the Trump presidency. In many ways, Donald Trump was so close to damaging so many institutions. And it really was about the people. What Peter and I were struck by is, without these advisors, many of whom, had really alarming views of Donald Trump, he would have just been, another old dude shouting at the television in between golf games, right? So it really mattered. And one of the paradoxes is that often some of the worst enablers were often also the resistors at key moments. Someone who served in Trump's White House said to us, look, there are no heroes in the Trump White House. And again, this is someone who actually served there. And I think that's the complicated story. Figures like John Kelly, like even Bill Barr, they again and again and again, they facilitate Trump. In some ways, they give him the successes to the extent he had them. And yet at key moments, they're also the ones who are sounding the alarm. I think it's just amazing to me. So many people were willing to go into the wood chopper of the Trump White House, knowing inevitably, but deluding themselves that they would not somehow also be chopped up.